Hello and welcome to On Second Thought with Mike and Luke, an ongoing conversation about ideas and current events. We discuss the underlying connections and root causes that help us discover what is really true. We're developing an antiviral mindset in an age of spiritual illness.
What is the antiviral for? Is it the spiritual illness?
Well, I want to have a spiritual immune system. That's how I think about it.
It's just apropos right now because we're in a heightened sickness environment, right? But
yeah,
it really applies all the time.
it does,
But
right?
there are times when it's more important than others.
It seems like the darkness has become more invasive of late, right?
I mean, I don't know what you do. I take one of those zinc pills. When I feel an itchy throat, I just go take them for like 2 days.
Oh, you
and
do?
I don't get a cold. I have a parent who does what's the all flu some kind of tablet, chewable.
Okay.
And they take airborne.
Oh, yeah.
They get on a plane, they take airborne for the day before they get, 2 days before they get on a plane.
You know, it's funny.
Just to not get a cold.
COVID proved something that I think I already knew, which is that planes are about the healthiest place you can be on. Because their air is so filtered. It's like the purest air you're going to breathe. Yeah. So there was no COVID ever documented to spread on an airplane. It's the exact place you would think it would.
Yeah.
Everybody's breathing the same air.
Yeah. Congested environment. Nope. But yeah, antiviral mindset.
Yeah.
Appropriate in our age.
Well, hey, you wanted to talk about the election path.
Okay, so yeah. This is a good,
COVID,
interesting.
Trump, Russia.
You know, what's interesting is when we talk about something and we're trying to get on second thought, we're trying to dig underneath and we make a statement and we're trying to work at something, right?
Yeah.
And then you see it, the same ideas pop up in articles you read. It's like, sometimes they disagree with you, sometimes they agree with you.
Right.
But this was one that disagreed. So I made the statement where it says that and I don't know did you see all the COVID mask stuff? I'm sorry, I got out of the shot, didn't I?
You did.
I moved
That's
a little
all right.
bit.
Keep going.
Did you see all the COVID mask stuff that came up just recently, like the last 2 days?
I saw like Fauci back on talking about masks are good. I can't.
CNN called him on it, which is very interesting, saying you said they didn't work before.
Lightly.
But it was still intriguing.
It was something, yeah.
I actually reversed that one. I think that was in support of it. You know how like when you're the attorney in the movie, so to speak, you ask your witness what you think they're going to ask them,
right?
So you can softball it. That's actually, I don't think it was a conservative win that CNN's getting tough. I think they're lobbing the softball.
Well, so this is a little bit of field, but CNN got destroyed when Trump left because they dedicated all their time to Trump.
I know.
And so they had to make this effort, and they have been, at least on some level,
producers.
to say we're going to be neutral.
I know.
They've
done a lot of things.
Presidents or CEOs.
And some of their on-air talent they let go of. Mm-hmm. And anyway, another one was New York City did things right before Labor Day. They sent up drones to backyard parties of a certain size because they want to keep an eye on the spread of COVID.
This weekend.
This weekend. And then I saw another one, a health department, I don't remember which state it was, gave a formal warning, a health alert, a warning, and that they're saying you probably should wear masks, but we're not requiring it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, my theory had been, what is all this stuff? It's the pathway to an election strategy or campaigning strategy.
Okay.
That they made so much hay with it last time, and the pathway, the ability to cheat and mail out ballots and do all these things. Now, I saw an interview I watched an interview with Tucker Carlson on Adam Carolla, and I mentioned this last time, but one of the things they talked about was masks, and Carolla asked them, do you think they're going to bring masks back? Seeing the same thing. Mm-hmm. And Tucker Carlson says, no, I do not think they're going to. It was a total failure, and it is too far abroad that it was a failure. They're not going to do that again.
Okay.
Carolla bringing up because of the election gains that they got from it. He goes, yeah, here's what they're going to do instead. War with Russia.
So what is war with Russia going to do?
It gives war powers. Number one, it gives war powers.
Oh, they're going to declare war.
War with Russia. Number two, a sitting president is very tough to beat when it's a wartime president. It doesn't matter how unpopular they are. They've shown it over and over. They don't like to unseat somebody who's quote unquote at the helm of a war.
Right.
So, and I thought interesting, and he's completely convinced that this is what we're going to do. He goes, first of all, they want to go to war with Russia anyway.
Yeah,
but
they have for a long time.
And they have, and it's the whole industrial military complex. It's big money.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I thought that's interesting on 2 points. One, the Russia war. I could see his point, and I don't know if it's true or not. But number two, I thought it's interesting that Carolla, in a sense, agreed with my thought about COVID, but Tucker said, no, I don't think that. So it's like, it's still the right thought to think. It's not just about COVID, right?
Well,
It's
the other
right
side
to
of
be
that,
questioning.
the other side of that I've heard and concerned me is if they institute a draft. I've heard talk of that, and what you would be trying to do is, if the military is totally captured on a cultural level, that,
Yes.
that it's an indoctrination system, the
Yeah.
same that public schools have become
Yeah,
in
yeah,
so many
yeah.
places,
Yeah.
then what you got then is all of your military age males who are the most
18 to
likely
22.
to resist tyrannical governments at
Yeah,
home
yeah, yeah.
are now getting shipped out
Yeah.
and become part of
Forced
an
indoctrination.
enforced indoctrination.
Yeah. And going hand in hand with that is, I've seen many articles recently over the past few months, the military is having a very difficult time recruiting.
Right.
Because they are changing and they are becoming woke, and people don't want to go do it.
Well, and the reality is that the majority of the military is white males, and they're de-emphasizing and resisting promotion. They have actively supported programs to get into positions of leadership that white males are not allowed to apply to, and white males are the majority of the military.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why would you?
Yeah.
Why would I encourage my sons
Yeah.
to go be
Yeah.
part of a system that rejects them?
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
It's a crap show until we have a real conflict, and we're going to probably get our butts kicked.
Yeah.
For
I
a
think it's
season.
an invitation.
Until, wars can go bad, until somebody wants to win, and they get a general or generals who want to win. And then it can turn around. But
Well, and that's where I think that part of what we're seeing in our culture is elite. Part of the way the elites can take such bold moves is they're convinced that technology can fill in the gaps where the people had to in the past. Right? If we needed factory workers, we needed people to go along, we needed votes. All of that can now be replaced with technology. Right? Well, militarily, that's also right on the horizon, if not already here. You can send a swarm of drones and you don't need a battalion of soldiers.
unless you need to occupy geography.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
I don't
been
know
the
what the limits of
conventional
technology
wisdom.
are,
The
right?
conventional wisdom is technology can win battles, but if you need to get ground, you have to have people on the ground.
Well, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what, if you know that when you go out of your house to have a party in New York, there's a drone hovering over.
Yeah.
And the drone doesn't just take pictures of
Yeah.
the tops of people's heads. It documents the connection, like each phone that's present in the room. It
Yeah.
tracks those people where they go afterward, right?
Yeah.
And finds out where they live. It knows
yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
So that whenever you decide we're going to go get this guy, we know where he's been, we know where he's
yeah.
going.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, so connect that to Trump being assassinated, because that has come up,
Okay.
right? That keeps
well,
coming
you
up.
know what? I just wanted to mention on this. Yes, I don't know if anybody saw or if you saw the interview with Trump and Tucker.
No, I didn't see it.
Oh, it was good.
I mean, it was
I know
like,
you didn't like it because you thought it was lightweight. But
yeah, it was like there was nothing newsworthy. I kept waiting for clips to come out from it that would like say, oh, it's worth watching. And there wasn't,
even though, okay, so that's a fair statement in one sense, but from another vantage point, the debates pulled 12 million audience rating, down
Yeah.
from 24 to the other Trump audience, the other years. And the Twitter one, or X if you want to call it, I'm going to keep saying Twitter,
Okay.
is
Twitter X.
290 million views the last time I saw it.
Yeah, but
now
it
there's default.
takes 2 seconds to get one of
That's
those
the
views.
question. It's
I
more
don't give that
difficult.
any credibility.
But you're going to have the same dynamic in 12 million audience rating. They don't know. They're doing boxes, and it's all math driven, and they don't really know how long a person is on or not on. So there's
Wait, who
gonna be,
doesn't know?
when they do the television, when they say 12 million people tuned into this, they don't know if it's grandma turned it on and she went and made dinner.
I don't know that that's not true. If you're in a Nielsen household, they monitor your TV consistently throughout.
That you're standing there and you're watching and engaging, that means there's 12 million people that were following what they do, or does it mean the box is turned on that?
Well, even the box is turned on is more than 2 seconds of Twitter before you scroll on.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. So I don't know enough about what that is what a Nielsen rating
So
includes.
part of
But
what
the
I would
point is,
rate
I
it
think-
though is on the Twitter side is that how much engagement did it get? How many people were quoting it, posting it, commenting on it. It wasn't very high. It was incredibly low. It was far less than 1% of viewers were either reposting it, sharing it, commenting on it, bookmarking it.
Well, I've commented on it 3 times.
On here. Yeah, sure.
Well, and so one of them is the assassination. He asks him. I remember thinking about assassination during 2016 after he'd won, the first year he'd won.
Yeah.
And thinking, and talking in private conversations that I wonder if there is conversations about assassinating Trump. They're clearly trying to get rid of this guy and nothing's really working.
Right.
And anyway, that was Tucker's argument. And he literally asked Trump 3 different times. And Trump never really responded to the question in particular. He just kind of, and then he kind of took it, and he didn't like steer away. He just didn't give an answer.
He like pretended he didn't hear it.
No, he didn't pretend. The answer that he gave basically was the American people are smarter than everybody thinks. They know what's going on.
Yeah.
But he didn't address
That is his main
concern.
strategy, though. His main strategy is I'm going to get elected by them coming after me. And that'll wake people up to what's really going on.
Maybe that is, but
the problem is
Tucker's
people aren't
question's
waking
real.
up. And I doubt they'll assassinate him. I think they'd much rather imprison him, for one. Because it feels like justice to people who hate him.
Here's the quote. Do you think Trump will win re-election? Let's see. He asked which agencies participated in Russian collusion hoax and subdued information about Biden's family corruption, and will they let Trump win re-election? Tucker says this. No, of course not. He says we're speeding toward assassination, obviously. So he's an interesting guy when he says things like obviously, things that have been convincing to him. He's very conversational. He's not an elitist trying to persuade you because he's going to give you the 3 most, he's just free-forming it and telling you what he thinks, right?
Yeah.
Obviously. And no one will say that, but I don't know how you can't reach that conclusion, Carlson says. They have decided, permanent Washington, both parties, have decided that there's something about Trump that is so threatening to them, they just can't have it.
Well, and I think that the CIA and whatever its involvement was in Kennedy's assassination learned that, and I think this goes back to the technology question. They learned that there's other ways and more effective ways to assassinate someone's character, their reputation.
That was my conclusion, that it was
positions of power.
It has been nothing but a nightmare for them.
Yeah.
Even though they took out the man that.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how much they would say it's been a nightmare for them, in the sense that they have had free reign since Kennedy till just recently. No one really pays that much attention to him. Julian Assange sort of started something that got people paying attention to the CIA, but for years they've been able to overthrow countries all over the world with basically a green light from both parties.
Yeah.
So,
or maybe no light, they just do it anyway.
I mean, yeah, if no politicians are willing to step to them, right? That was the open warning. I think it was Chuck Schumer said when Trump first got elected, like, oh, he's talking bad about the intelligence agencies. You don't want to do that, right? And he was the head Republican the head Democrat, and he's giving advice to Trump, which is crazy.
That was another thing that Tucker brought up, that exact conversation. He goes, that's one of the more remarkable conversations, because what Schumer is basically saying is that if you're the president and the CIA doesn't agree with your policies, which actually the CIA is a part of the executive branch, they report to the president. Supposedly. But they don't agree with you, they can take you out. He goes, Chuck Schumer described a crime. Yeah. That is a crime. And if that's where we are really to, we have lost our republic. We're not in a republic anymore.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's correct also. So it's an interesting. So assassination, his other point, Tucker's, is that they tried, and then he lists off the efforts that have been going on, and none of them have worked. And this effort right now is imprisonment. Well, to silence him, to not have him not elected. Yeah. Then to silence him, then to cripple his administration, and then to impeach him twice.
Yeah.
And then now to indict him. They've indicted him, I don't know, 5 times now or something like that. Yeah. And now to have trials on, Super Tuesday, whatever.
Yeah.
Or
the day before the trial begins.
Yeah.
Yeah. So explain that, because I don't know that people follow that.
Well, there's a Tuesday in March when all this voting happens. It's not the election day, but it's
primaries,
next spring.
In like 7 different states.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. And to do the trial starts the day before that.
Right.
And so
and most people say that after Super Tuesday, the primary's over. because by that time there's been enough states to vote that it becomes clear who will be the real candidate.
Yeah.
And so they want to be able to cripple him because, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. So if he's on trial and he's not free to go, that means he's not free to campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So if he wins the primary, in reaction to all these indictments, he can't campaign. Now, Biden didn't campaign, but he had the administrative state and the tech companies behind him, and so he didn't need to.
He pulls in 5 swing states.
Right. But Trump won't. He won't have any of that backing.
Yeah. He won't. And the other interesting thing that he didn't answer Tucker asked him in the interview, Mr. President, so it seems clear that there was cheating in the 2020 election and that in primary states these were stolen from you. Yes. What are you going to do to stop that?
Yeah, he has no plan.
And he doesn't. He did not.
We're just going to get so many votes.
He goes, yes, something along the lines of, we have a plan to address that. We're going to look into it. Or I don't. But it was a very dissatisfying answer.
Yeah.
For me, who is in support of a good answer, and I support him with a good answer, and I didn't get one.
And that is, again, there's so many things about Trump that I think if he could do it, I'd vote for him. Like he wants the right thing. He's just not capable of making it happen. That's how I see Trump.
But are any of them?
Yeah, DeSantis really is.
No,
I think that is how he won Florida.
Okay, wait a minute.
Because he cleaned up the election process.
In him administrating Florida, he's been superb.
Yeah.
He's been a great executive chief.
Which is what we need.
And in that sense, if you compare his little fiefdom of Florida and Trump's U.S., the complexity is off the charts difference. But if you just complain those, Trump did not do as well with the whole U.S. It's way more complex, and you could have arguments there, but DeSantis has done excellent. So take excellent DeSantis. How does he stop in the swing states?
Well, so he has to have...
How do any of them?
How do you stop when the corruption is built in?
Is built in, and they're baking it in more and more every month. I don't care. I keep seeing articles about Michigan, Georgia, and now Wisconsin. They're uncovering corruption everywhere.
Yeah.
More files, more proof.
A Democrat in Wisconsin just came forward to sue corruption in his own primary.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because he realized he won and the other guy didn't.
Yeah. So what you have to have is an organization that's on the ground. So if assuming that there's a limit to how much they can cheat. Okay. So let's say they, on the night of the election, right, when they say they're stop counting and they block up the windows and then they keep counting through the night, there's still a tangible limit of how many they can wake up in the morning and say, okay, we got an extra 50,000 votes.
Why is there a tangible limit?
Because there is just reality. Like, you can't have more than 100% of registered voters vote.
They do. They've documented it. There are counties that had more than 100% of registered voters, and they counted in 2020.
So that's where you have to be able to fight. And part of the reason...
But all the people are saying, if you fight that afterwards, you lose every time.
Well, but here's the problem. Trump didn't put up a fight. He did a bunch of shenanigans. He did a bunch of tweeting. But all of his lawyers...
I think they filed 18 lawsuits after
but they all were... None of them were actually dismissed on grounds.
No, that's true. That's
correct. All the stuff that he was saying he was going to bring out was the Dominion, or the unprovable Dominion stuff, because it's software. How do you prove software?
Argument be that he tried, and now, in one sense, you could say the judicial system was against him and didn't even give him an ear.
Or you could say that this guy is so... toxic, divisive, that nobody wants to be his lawyer except a guy who wants to be in the public eye. Rudy Giuliani.
Well, okay, that's
There's
true.
a handful of loudmouth lawyers who want to be famous.
Okay,
those are the only
fine.
people willing to give him the time of day.
He has lots of lawyers. I don't deny
He does
that.
not.
He does.
He has a lot of 25-year-old lawyers.
I don't care what they...
Well, they don't know what they're doing when you need to fight a national election battle.
I'm not going to disagree that the ABA has been trying to keep lawyers from Trump, and they have been successful.
I'm not talking about ABA. I'm talking about actual law firms who just say, we won't touch him with a 10-foot pole. Yeah. The actual law firms who know how to fight.
That's because the ABA is saying, we'll pull your license,
It's a lot more than that. It's the entire institutional elite saying, if you touch him, you're done with.
Yeah, they're blackballed.
Yeah, and that's way beyond the ABA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my point, he still has lots of attorneys. But you're right, he doesn't have the pick of expertise that he would have otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got Rudy Giuliani. How old is
Okay.
that guy? 80 something.
Okay, no, I don't. But I'm not in.
His
I'm
lawyer
not,
right
I'm not
now is
with
like
you
a
on this. That's
25-year-old model.
You're poking fun, and I don't.
No, I'm not. I'm
don't,
saying this is
he does.
this is the caliber of lawyer, and this has been documented throughout his presidency. That more and more people, there were few people during his presidency in the beginning, who said, "Look, he's the president. He needs our help." But the Republicans just incrementally backed away as time went on because he just keeps alienating more and more people. So to think he's going to get back in office and suddenly where are more people going to
I'm
appear?
in agreement with you on this.
They don't have them.
That's another of my dilemmas that I don't think has been answered, and that is if he were to win and by a magic genie he gets the most votes and he's put in the White House, what does he do then?
Yeah, he doesn't. He
And
does nothing.
I don't.
He becomes
I
a
don't-
lame duck on the first day of his in office.
Maybe, yeah.
He'll fight and he'll bluster and that's about it.
I think the dilemma is, so whatever you say about Trump in this venue, let's just say, okay, we agree, but now take those same reasons and put them on any Republican candidate. How do any of them really actually defeat
There's only two
the
candidates.
administrative state?
There's only two Republican candidates. Because the rest of them are all part of the administrative
We're going to
state.
disagree here too. Because you're going to say DeSantis, right?
It's Trump and
I
DeSantis
don't
are the
think he
only
is.
experienced.
I think
active-
DeSantis is. I think his nose has gone underwater. I
It
don't
may
think he's
have.
a viable
I don't know.
candidate at this point. Did you see the news just today?
No.
One of his super PAC contributors, people that set it up, folded it and just said, "I'm supporting Trump." One of his big super PACs.
Yeah, that got debunked already.
Really?
Yeah.
That was today. I read that.
The number of rumors and lies that come out of the Trump campaign, I read it too, and then it was immediately debunked by somebody else.
Oh, I didn't
So
see that.
so part of the Trump sphere, right? Because the
Yeah.
people who are backing him, especially on Twitter, which is where all the news people are and the battle, that's where people argue, right? They're just constantly, it's like vendetta after vendetta, lie after lie. It's like middle school drama cranked up to 11. And so there's a couple personalities in there, but there's this whole kind of cloud around them of the people who just pile on. And they're just as well known to be lying about all of it.
So this is the problem. Is I think this is the new form of communication. I just saw KJP, Biden spokesperson,
Karine Jean-Pierre.
Yeah, she made a statement. The Biden administration has made the most secure American border in U.S. history. And you think to yourself,
Was it the
make
Canadian
that-
border?
No, the Mexican southern border.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, this is Animal Farm. This is 1984.
The lie is the point.
The lie is the point. You just say the opposite, and it doesn't matter if it's true or not. The state supports this statement, and it's gaslighting everybody. Common sense.
So I heard a psychologist,
Which is what
from
I hear
Soviet,
you saying is happening on Twitter with the campaigns.
It's the Trump tactic too, yeah. So there was a psychologist who was studying the Soviet Union who said that the lies they would put out were so egregious, it became obvious that they knew, in fact, they wanted you to know that it was a lie. It was like so depart from reality.
Really?
The goal is not to convince you. The goal is to humiliate you into acquiescence. That if you
interesting.
accept the lie, you know that you're bowing down to liars. You know it. And
To
so if
force
they
you to
tell
make a
if they
choice.
tell a lie that's too close to the truth, then you might maintain your dignity. And tyrants hate for
that's an
citizens to have
interesting-
dignity.
Where do you see this? What was this?
The internet. I don't know. I could find it for you.
But you said something Russian?
It was a psychologist studying Soviet era propaganda. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So it needs to be far enough from the truth that you are faced with the choice, do I risk my life or be silent? If they can make you be silent to preserve your life, to buy this big lie, then that exercises greater demand and totalitarian.
It's another form. It's like the 2 + 2 = 4 question. I want you to not just be willing to admit that 2 + 2 = 5, but you have to believe it.
Man, I saw an article. So this is your era, Jean-Luc Picard. I saw an episode of
my middle school years.
your middle school years. Well, you were the Jean-Luc and I was the Kirk, right?
right.
The reading.
Yeah.
So I call it your era. But there was an episode, he gets captured by, I think, the Kardashians, and they're torturing him, but it's psychological.
Are they actually
torture.
Kardashians?
Oh, I said Kardashians.
Kardashians. So
with a C.
close.
Woo,
Yeah.
that just came out.
I mean, they're both aliens.
Yeah. Anyway, he's being, how many lights do you see? And there's sleep deprivation, noise deprivation, all these
classic
things.
torture.
And there's 2, and the guy keeps saying there's 4. And Jean-Luc, this psychological, Kirk is the 60s macho man kind of invulnerable, invincible guy.
Right. My power of my will.
Yeah. Jean-Luc is the emotional stability, maturity,
Right.
It's the 90s patting themselves on the back. But in any case, this respected, revered man breaks in the show. And he says 4. And right when he starts to admit it, 4. And he's weeping and he's saying there's 4 lights. And the guy's saying, are you sure there's 4? Yes, there's 4. His rescue team shows up, right?
Yeah.
And it was very intriguing. I remember watching him, as it aired, and it's like, wow, that's pretty. And then he's basically goes to therapy afterwards, right?
Right.
But anyway, why'd we get in? Oh yeah, psychological torture.
Psychology of Soviet communists.
Tough, demanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, I want to pause for a sec. If you're still with us, we appreciate you. And I want to encourage you to subscribe if you're on a podcast platform. I was looking at our numbers, right? Because I kind of keep track of that.
Okay.
And in the last 24 or 28 days, that's how YouTube tracks it. We've had almost 600 views.
Really?
Which is pretty wow, that's a lot. And then I was looking at the actual podcast numbers, and it's like a few dozen. But the problem is, of all the places where we might get...
wait, what does it mean? What does that mean?
It just means that we have way more views on YouTube than we do anywhere else.
Oh, podcasting. Gotcha. I don't
So
understand
podcast
that.
downloads.
But
what I'm saying is, of all the places that might kick us off for our views, YouTube is it.
Oh yeah, I
right?
know. Yeah.
And I see how you could build up that loyalty of man, they're really giving us the numbers.
Well, maybe they'll just demonetize us first.
Well, we are not monetized, so it doesn't matter. Those of you who don't know,
I have
YouTube
thought
will
about
pay
that.
you, but only if you have over 1,000 subscribers, and I think we have 120 something.
I was thinking about that in terms of I was thinking about a job, thinking about something I might enjoy doing, and then I was thinking, what if they do I'm not on social media, right?
Yeah.
But now I am. That's what
Here
this
we are.
is.
Yeah,
And I thought, is this going to hurt me?
Your name, image, and likeness.
Is this going to hurt me? Is somebody going to find this? And I said this stuff about Obama or about Trump or whatever.
Yeah, you said he was a Muslim. How dare you?
Well, I'm probably
Next
not
you're
going to do
start
today.
questioning his birth certificate.
My thing that I'm not going to do is I'll tease it for next one. Obama the Destroyer. There's a lot of stuff coming out. Anyway, I'm not going to do it right now.
Okay.
Leftist colonizers.
Yeah, okay.
What are leftist colonizers?
Let's talk about that. So one of the accusations that my leftist teachers growing up and trainings that I went through as an educator in Oregon, they would often criticize the West, right? And by it, they really meant Christian nations, European nations too, for being colonizers, right? Colonize India, colonize Africa, Asia, all these places, and sort of take over, strip them of their natural resources,
heritage,
imprison the opposition governments, enslave people. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. And a lot of that is legitimate criticism.
There's some truth in it.
Although the problem is, as a Christian, is that Christianity is inherently colonial in the sense that we want to take over every nation with Christianity, right? And we can debate what that does to the nations.
Yeah.
But Jesus clearly says, go to every nation and make them Christians, make disciples of all these people. And so that is a colonial impulse. It's not necessarily to subjugate them to one nation over another, but to subjugate them to Christ.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's interesting is I've been paying more attention. In fact, I saw a video of an African politician, and I don't know from what nation, but he was irate over the fact that the U.S. State Department, who gives out tons of financial support in the areas of medicine and other things.
I know what story you're doing.
So they are saying if you don't promote same-sex relationships in these African nations, then you will not only lose funding from the U.S., but you'll be sanctioned by the U.S.
I know it. I saw that.
And that's crazy to me that we are going to push that kind of sexual debauchery onto these nations who are traditionally minded far more than America is. Yeah. But the idea of are we the bad guys, right? I was listening to a podcast this last week, Sean Ryan, who's a former CIA, actually a Navy SEAL, and he was talking to another veteran, and they couldn't decide. Are we the bad guys now? Yeah. Right, in the world.
Yeah. But your point is colonizers, on the word colonizers.
That they have they're colonizing the world.
That's its own
They're
form of
making their demands.
That's right. It is suppression and oppression of other people's cultures and heritages.
Right.
Yeah.
And
that's another point.
Part of what I see, so I go to Africa, right, a couple times a year, and Chinese government is very involved in Africa. Sierra Leone, where I have gone, all their big, smooth, straight paved roads are
know.
built by
I
Chinese
know.
money and accruing all this debt, which is the same method America
It's
does.
enslavement. It's a pathway
Well,
of
it's debt
enslavement.
slavery, but
Yeah, that's right.
But what I'm saying is America does this all over the world too.
Yeah.
But we criticize it when China does it.
Yeah.
But if I'm Africa and the Americans are saying we have to promote same-sex activity, and the Chinese are saying, well, you can keep your traditions, I might go with China.
Yeah,
In fact, I probably would.
Yeah, Uganda, Melissa's sister was a missionary for a long time, and she went there, and that's what they have, this very intricate highway system built. China built it, and Uganda owes China.
Yeah, and they
They
will
owe
for a
them
long
big
time.
and they're gonna be underneath them.
Right.
Yeah, it's a clever strategy, but yeah, the leftist colonialism.
But part of what that makes me think is that, and this does connect to the Christian nationalism conversation that we'll have in a little bit, or part 2 of however many. It reinforces the idea in my head that everybody's colonial. Every big idea, every worldview is trying to take over. And that is the war of ideas. Some people call it the culture war. I think the Bible, in some ways, calls it spiritual war, right? Being that in your heart is where you believe things. So it's a battle of hearts and minds, right? All of that it's Christianity versus a bunch of other systems who are all saying we think our way is right, our moral frame is superior, and so we need to dominate other moral frames. And so you see leftism doing that in Africa. You see the Chinese government and its seeking of power doing that in lots of places in the world. It's how things are, and to imagine that there'll be some neutral, we'll all agree to get along, I think is a fantasy.
Well, the way I think of that is that I think of colonialism as different. I think the war or the conflict of ideas, there is a persuasive form of that in which, as Christians, we call it evangelism,
Right.
or making disciples, making
Teaching.
proselytizing. Let's say that.
Right.
Proselytizing. I think there's a difference between proselytizing and colonializing. So to me, proselytizing means if I'm trying to proselytize you, which I think what Christianity does, I am trying to persuade you to an idea. Now, in that sense, it shares a similarity that I want to be victorious. I think I have an idea.
Yeah.
It's that Jesus came and is Lord and defeated death. And I think it trumps the ideas that you and I both used to believe, that I used to believe, and maybe I think you still believe that is a lie.
Yeah.
And I want this to be victorious and to sway you. But I want to do it by persuasion. Colonialism comes in and says,
Conquest.
you have to change.
Yeah.
You're going to do it our way now. And even missions before Hudson Taylor, right? They'd go in and they brought Western perspectives, and Hudson Taylor says, I'm going to dress like these Chinese people, and I'm going to not take over their culture, and so I think that you get the
And Hudson Taylor was a Christian missionary.
Yeah, Christian missionary, but you get this beginning idea that colonialism doesn't have to mean the same as proselytizing, that there is a winning this war with argument in idea that is you join my side freely. The other one is an enforced push. And so I kind of try to think of them as sharing a commonality but being quite distinct.
Yeah, and if you look at his history of nations, they conquer each other all throughout, all over the world. There's no place that has no
it's never
battle
ceased.
of conquest.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But it's also, and there's another, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but there's another variant to the idea of colonialism, because I would say that Rome, in a sense, was not colonial. They were conquering, there you go, thank you. They were conquering, they went over and took nations, but their strategy was to say, Greeks came and said, you will all be Greek. They came and says, no, you keep your heritage and your way of doing things, but you submit to us and you give us money, right? And we have a garrison, And to me, that is less colonial in the sense that colonialism seems to have come in and says not only been a forced presence, but now the right way in India is to be British. Right. You're going to take high tea. You're going to take our customs.
Well, and this is where the church-state dichotomy is important, right? Because what I hear you describing is Rome being, their conquest was political, uniquely political, whereas Christianity is actually conquering through persuasion, right? Not through domination, but conquering culturally. But if you combine the two, Now you have political and military domination with a cultural side built in, which is what Europe did when it went to South America and Africa and all these other places. So it was saying, well, we're going to make the world England because England's Christian, therefore God is with us.
Yes, that's true.
Assuming
Rome
that their
later did
culture
that,
was the highest expression of
Superior,
Christianity.
Yes, that's right.
Right?
Yes,
Versus
that's,
saying
I think, a misstep,
you could
personally.
go, so like when I go to Africa and I listen to their singing, they do a little bit of American songs, but most of the songs are totally their own, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
If they've originated in America, I can't tell anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so it's uniquely their own.
Yeah.
And I notice it too because I think, oh man, like it's hard for me to sing.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to sing along.
Yes, right.
All those
Even
sorts
the
of things.
cadences
It's
and
very
rhythms.
different, yeah.
Yes, that's what I think that other wrinkle of colonialism is, the stamping out of the uniqueness of each heritage.
Right.
And making a monolithic cookie cutter thing.
Well, and I don't
want
want to, I don't assume that like, well, the way that the instrumentation and the music, because music is one of the easiest access points to culture, right? That the way we do church music is probably better, right? So therefore we need to go over there and tell them to change it up.
Okay.
I avoid that.
Yes, I agree with you.
But as much as I can learn from them, they can learn from me too. So there is some hybridization that goes on.
Yeah.
And that's not bad.
Okay. Where this inevitably gets, this is a conversation I had with some friends quite a number of years ago. And like my friends got mad at me. And they said the way I was talking about the hemisphere of Western civilization,
Yeah.
that I was acting as if it was superior to other civilizations.
Yeah.
And I said, I think there's ways in which it is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So here's the conundrum. When you say, no, colonialism is unhealthy, and there are some unhealthy things about it, how do you do that but still keep room for the idea that I think there can be culture A and B, and culture A does certain things better than culture B?
Right.
And it's not just that they're different.
So
it's better.
If you look from a pure, right, the Bible is obviously not Western.
Right.
Right? It's not written by
it
a bunch of Europeans. Okay, so we can...
Not the heathen Westerners.
So we could look at the Bible and say, for example, I think the primary message of the Bible is that what's wrong with the world is sin and corruption. So if you want to look across nations and see which nation has the least corruption, that's very measurable, right? In fact, there's an annual report put out by an international agency. I don't know if it's through the UN or somewhere else. And it literally ranks every country in the world by their corruption, both political and economic, right? And America's not in the top 10. It might not even be in the top 20. But you could easily look at that and say, okay, where the corruption is lowest, the civilization is falling down, where it's the worst, right? In a lot of these sub-Saharan African countries, it's the worst. And what you'll also see is if you link up per capita GDP and corruption, there's going to be pretty strong correlation. In other words, the more corruption, the more poverty you get as well. And so does the corruption create poverty? Does the poverty create corruption? Yes, right? But God's solution is every human heart is made new, that the corruption is resolved, and as a result, and this is why Africa, Western Africa, where I've gone, is very susceptible to the prosperity gospel because they're so poor. So if God wants you to be wealthy. But the Bible does say if you do right, you do get blessed. And a lot of that is very practical. You get blessed because you don't have to pay as many bribes, right? You're doing the right thing, but your employees will do the right thing. And now you can trust them, and now you can do more, right? Instead of always having to make up for the things that are lost or stolen or broken and no one cares. All of that is if not moral, it's ethical, but it's character, it's parents, it's families, and all that comes back to the morality the Bible teaches as a solution. And that's what we're seeing break down in America. So you can fully expect that our prosperity will go along with it.
You want to go into Christian nationalism?
Let's do it.
Okay. Let me start with saying something.
Okay.
I was thinking about last time. Because we got into it late last time, and we had by far our longest, is there any way for you to even tell if anybody listened to an hour and 45 minutes?
I can't. No, I don't know.
That was an accident, mistake. Anyway, that's what happened. But getting into it in a more planned way, I had anticipated starting out before we even got into it, talking something about how do you have a conversation where you have disagreements on the front side.
Yeah.
What things actually trump the conversation? What or values or things of importance? And I kind of wish we had. I wish I had said something, because here's what I felt. Now I'm just going to ask you this. I don't know if you felt this or not, but I felt like it didn't get tense last time. I don't think that. But because I was trying to ask the question, what do you mean by it? And I was really trying to understand you.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, I think I might have come across as like disagreeing when I wasn't saying yes or no to anything you were saying yet. I was just trying to understand and clarify.
Well, and part of what I was struggling with last time, and if those of you who didn't listen, I encourage you to, but it's in the second half, let's say, of our podcast, right?
That's
of a long
a generous
episode.
way to...
But you were breaking down, so for example, you were talking about 3 different levels of political discourse, from the persuasion to the legal mandate to the physical threats of violence, right? The infliction of a political system.
Yeah.
Right. And part of what I was struggling with is to say, what does it have to do with Christian nationalism? And when I went back and listened to it, I felt like that was it. Like we never really got to the topic in what I was listening to. So it'd be interesting to talk about that more.
Well, I guess, yeah. So, yeah.
Because every political system has to answer that question of with how much force do you intend to push forward your view, right?
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily, I mean, unless your view is pacifism, it doesn't necessarily.
Well, it's interesting that you say
do
that,
anything
because
unique to yours.
pacifism comes into this conversation at some point, which we won't do it right now, but it comes into it at some point, at least from my perspective. Let me just say this, and then we'll start doing it.
Okay.
But I also want to say, I think that you and I have an agreement, not an agreement, we agree temperamentally in terms of ideas and whatnot. And we're both not super afraid to have a conversation with somebody that could have disagreements in it, or have a little bit of controversy even.
Yeah.
But in doing so, it's hard to disagree. It's hard to, am I being heard? Why do they keep asking this?
Yeah.
Right? Tucker asked Trump 3 times about the assassination. And part of what I thought is, I wonder what is Trump hearing?
Okay.
Is he choosing to not answer on purpose, or is he not even hearing? Does he not hear Tucker 3 times? Part of me was saying, if I was Tucker, I'd say, wait. You haven't answered my question, Mr. President. And clearly, Tucker's a professional in that realm.
Well, he also knows Trump well enough to know that you can't push him if you want to keep him.
Yes. He said that later, when Trump gets pushed, he starts meandering off and he stops making sense. So I try to give him room to say what he's going to say.
Right.
And I thought, that's really interesting. I guess all that's an illustration of, it's easy to, it's hard to have conversations where you're trying to understand another person and then say what you think. Truly in response to what they think, not just what you think they think.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what we're going to labor at, right? All right. So if you thought, I don't think we really got to it, what did you think of another way to say? Because my question is still, I want to be able to address my thoughts to what you are actually thinking.
Okay.
That's why I asked what I did. But
if I was going to summarize, the distance between our positions, right? And you've stated your position is a theistic natural law,
something like that. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know what
natural law theonomist. No, is theonomist right?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
So
that would be your position.
Oh, okay.
Or the people
some of the
in
terminology.
certain circles would like what you say.
Yeah. So, but that it would be something like God exists, and therefore we should do the things that are rational, and that are clear in nature and in God's world.
For a government.
As a government. Yeah. That should be what informs our laws.
That's the minimum connective point, to have a wide array of people, Christians and non-Christians, a pluralistic society.
Yeah.
That has moral goals, that has to be founded in something.
Right. And so my position is that I don't agree that's what America has ever been, maybe for a few years in the 90s, right? Where we sort of became neutral.
That's what its founding was.
But just the sheer volume, for example, of biblical quotations that are included in the founders in their discussions,
Yeah.
in their letters to each other, right, their correspondence. That the Bible informed every aspect of how they were doing what they were doing, and of reverence to God, and specifically the Bible's God. Now, were they inclusive about who could be involved? I think they were, right? So if you weren't a Christian, that didn't mean you were out. But if you were going to play in their sandbox, you had to agree to their rules, which was fundamentally that the Bible is establishing what's right and wrong, and now we're trying to work it out in this context. And so in that way, if we assumed that that's true about the founders, then I would argue they were Christian nationalists. That what I would want to see is Christianity makes the rules, and then everybody's welcome to play.
When you say founders, do you mean pre-1776 or do you mean constitutionally forward? Because I think those are two different things.
Well, I don't distinguish the two.
Well, so for example, William Penn.
But William Penn was quite a bit back, wasn't he? Was he not?
It was pre-1776. How the founders, or pilgrims, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
When you say founders, I think 1776. I think the constitutional people.
People who signed the Constitution.
But
people who
before
were
that,
part of
they had a different approach. So when William Penn comes along, they said, okay, we don't agree with you.
Yeah, but you're jumping back how far? 150 years? When you start
years, yeah.
start first colonies?
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying that the way they approached it was more like, you can't be here, go start your own state.
Because they were overtly churches starting the colonies.
That's right.
Right? The Massachusetts Bay Colony was saying,
So I would say that
we are an
church
expression
and
of our
state
church.
was overlapped more significantly before 1776, and the way they functioned was with that overlap.
Yeah, but sort of, because church
in
and state,
1776,
they were under the umbrella of the state of England. So
I
church
agree.
was running local magistrates.
I know.
While, I mean,
But
England
the
is
Church
a
of
Christian
England
nation
is
too.
integrated within the governmental structure of England.
Right.
And they were reflecting that same perspective.
Yeah.
So what I see is happened in 1776 is when they began to argue, they intentionally separated those things.
And this is
they had never
this is
done
the
before.
debate of federalism, right? Is to say, okay, all of these different states, independent countries up until now, with independent churches and movements and even cultures.
Yeah, we are a united
If we're going to
states.
come together, we've got to agree on the ground rules,
That's
right? And part of what informs those ground rules is even though we all read the Bible differently, we all read it.
Yes, that's correct.
So they're still going to have Bible reading. They're still going to have prayer before every session, right? Because that's
But they're going to have people who
the
don't
groundwork.
necessarily read the Bible. And they intentionally included, they moved from the God of the Bible to the God of nature, in my opinion.
Well, Jefferson did.
Well, it's in lots of their arguments, not just Jefferson.
Well, because it's a more inclusive argument.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, even though they were more inclusive, it's sort of like saying, like, who can live in my town? And then in that sense, when you start a town that's never been there before, you do have to ask that question. Nobody asks that question now, because people who live in our town, whoever moves here, right?
Apart from the immigration debate, which is
interesting,
similar.
yeah. And actually, you could look at, like, for example, how Eastern Europe is handling immigration. Is they're saying, if you're not Christian, you can't come here. So all of these folks from the Middle East who are trying to escape tyrants, or maybe they're looking for opportunity, or maybe they're looking to take over. I think it's probably a little of all that, because it's mostly military-age males that are fleeing, right? Poland, Czech Republic, these Eastern European countries are just saying, no, you can't come. Israel this week, did you read about this? So they had a riot with African migrants, and the Prime Minister of Israel said, you're out. We're deporting all of you, and every other African's going to go too. And you can go to Europe, you can go back to Africa, we don't care.
Building a wall.
Yeah, well, they've got walls all over.
I know, they already have walls. I thought that was a politically
but
loaded comment.
But part of what they're saying is, this is our culture, right? And this is what I listened to an interview, I believe it was Poland. It was like the president of Poland. And he said, look, we're a Christian nation. We're going to stay a Christian nation.
Yeah.
So if you bring in 100,000, 200, 500,000 Muslims, it's going to destroy our culture. We don't want that. We like our culture.
Yeah.
And the interviewer was like a Western European, journalist who was like shocked and offended. How dare you preserve your culture? Because your Western European culture is the lowest rung of every moral frame in the world right now. And so you get to crap on it whenever you want. So these guys just said, we're not playing the game. We have our own rules. And I respect that.
Yeah, well, they're declaring their sovereignty.
Yeah, but not just the sovereignty of their nation, the sovereignty over their culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you stated a positive statement of what it is? I mean,
Well, I think it's a pretty broad. There's a bunch of people out there writing about it, and I haven't done a deep dive on reading, but tried to keep up with the debates that are going on.
where do you fall out on the? We've asked this before, but it was quite a while ago, and so refresh me where you may be today on the role of church versus individual Christian
In what
in
sense?
Christian nationalism. From your perspective, what is the role of the church in that, and then what is the role of individual Christians? Is there a difference in your mind?
Yeah. So in a Christian nation, the church would not have an outsized role in leading governments, but Christians would. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is it the church's job to tell the Christians that they have to go do this? Or is it the Christian's job to discern if they're called by God to that or not?
Are you imagining a world where the pastor goes to an individual and says, you have to run for city council? Is that what you're asking?
I'm imagining a world where a pastor may say to his whole congregation, you are called by God to go and change the governments where you live. You all need to do this.
I think that should happen right now. I think if it's not happening, it's a problem.
Yeah. So I don't agree with that. I think that is not the role of the churches. I think if individuals feel called to government, that's fine. I have no problem with that. But the church's
what's the
calling
difference between those
is
two?
not government.
Because if the pastor gets to the pulpit, it says, this is our country. We have no king, but the people.
Okay, so
Wait, let me ask my question.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so if the pastor says, God judges kings throughout the Bible. A king sways the culture toward corruption, and God brings judgment upon that king and condemnation for his behavior. Mm-hmm. Well, America's kings, it's people. And so the judgment of God is on the people. That you can't blame Joe Biden. You got the leaders that you got. Even the corruption, you got the corruption that you allowed. And so for a pastor, just like Elijah would go to king and say, you need to repent and lead right according to God's definitions of justice. I think pastors today should be going to the people and saying, you need to lead this. You need to lead your town. You need to lead your magistrates. Yeah. And when you get into positions of power, wield that power toward justice.
So where I differ on that is two things: our country, but then underneath it, the analogy of how he addressed kings, and that since we're democratic electors in a republic, that's really us. I don't see those two connecting. I see when he addresses kings, he is addressing those that are in the sphere of authority given to them, and God addresses them in the sphere that they occupy. When you go to America, its citizens do not occupy that, and in particular, its Christians do not occupy that. Maybe you could say its citizens do in general, but that's not a Christian thing. So that's where I would get to when you said our country. You had the pastor saying our country, da-da-da. I don't agree.
Or our state, or our town.
But I don't agree with that. I think the church doesn't have a country. The church doesn't have a U.S., it doesn't have a Poland. Its individuals have dual citizenship. So for me, I'm a Christian, and I'm a resident of Oregon.
Yeah.
I have, and of the U.S., but I'm a resident of a secular structure. I'm a resident of another kingdom that's invisible, a part of the heavenlies. Those two residencies are not the same. And when I go to church, and that is talking to me in that sphere of my residency in the kingdom of heaven, and they don't have, it's not the calling of the church to go and administrate the residencies of the state.
So why is that unique to the state versus other forms of authority that are independent of the church? So for example,
what's an example? Yeah.
The family is an independent authority structure, right? Established by God. Mm-hmm. But the church has a ton to say about how families should operate.
It has stuff to say about the state also.
Yeah.
It just can't tell you got to go and fix that. The only difference with that
but
in
if
the
a pastor's,
family...
So if I'm a pastor and I go to you and say, you need to fix it, I'm not talking about that. But if you say to the people, this is your responsibility, this is our town, this is our place. And yeah, we're citizens of heaven, but we're called by God to lead.
Yes, but to lead in what? It's not to lead in civic government.
Why not?
Because it's nowhere in the New Testament.
It's nowhere in the New Testament?
That's right.
Why does it have to be in the New Testament?
because that's the only history we have of this gospel fleshing itself out in the world.
So
We
you
have no
exclude
other-
all the like literal books called Kings and how to be kings and
I-
the relationship between
I
prophets
don't
and kings.
exclude, depending on how you mean the word exclude, I can say a yes or a no. I don't exclude, but I minimize, because that is another structure that God was administrating in which the Mosaic law, the nation, and the religious people of God were the same. That's not there anymore.
So
We're in a
here's
new covenant.
So here's how I see it. Okay.
and there is no overlap of
And
that.
I feel the tension you were talking about.
Yeah.
Part of the reason the tension it matters is because we're trying to figure out, and I want to say this to those who are listening too. What Mike and I are trying to do is figure out what's the source and solution for the chaos that we agree
That's true.
has gripped
That's
the
true.
world,
That's
right?
true.
And so it's a huge deal.
Yeah.
Because everything that we're looking at and saying, how is God going to fix this?
Yeah.
We're trying to figure out what the right next step is for us and for everybody, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe give some advice.
Yeah.
Okay, so that being said,
Okay.
here's the designation I see in the Old Testament, right? And this is what my understanding of the Pilgrims, how they viewed it, is that the Old Testament gives you a model for how God wants nations to run. The New Testament gives a model for how God wants individuals to relate to each other. And so the best example, you see Moses going through the desert, and he's building from scratch a government, right? A nation, a culture. And so you've got religious activities, traditions, rituals. You've got legal activities where he sits for hours a day in judgment. And he's writing laws, right? And some of them are the 10 Commandments. They came straight from God. And others, he's kind of saying, if the donkey falls in a pit, what are you going to do? And so Jesus even comments, some of the laws Moses gave, because everybody's just hard-hearted and he's got to make things work. And so laws can be very practical sometimes and not perfect, even though they're in the Bible. But we're trying to learn from them. Okay. But what you see is Moses says to his brother Aaron, you're running the rituals and the worship, and I'm running the laws. I'm sitting in judgment. But they both need to go into the presence of God. Aaron goes and his priests go into the Holy of Holies. Moses goes into the tent of meeting. They're both ministers of God, but one is over church and one is over state. And so what I see is the spheres should be separated. They should influence each other because they submit to the same God, right? So I don't want my pastor to have an automatic seat on city council where he gets to come and give his say, right? But I also think the pastor should be speaking like Aaron would speak to Moses, right? Like the prophets would speak to the kings and say, you need to get right. Like John the Baptist would speak to Herod. You're not doing the right thing. And a call to that. And so in America, that call not only goes out to the magistrates, right, to the police officers, to the governors, but it also goes out to the people. You need to vote right. You need to persuade each other
So
of what's
that's
right.
why I had tried to, when I think about it, I have those spheres of influence. How does power relate? Of influence, laws, and then punishment, so to speak.
Yeah.
Not just, but when the state is not doing, anyway, what level? Because what you just described, the pastor, I agree, the pastor should speak to the nation. There's a prophetic voice the church has inside the nation, but that's a sphere of influence, not of power, not of law, it's not their kingdom.
I agree. But let's say I'm in a church, which I am, and I'm on the city council, which I am. I might go to my pastor and say, hey, we're struggling with this thing. Mm-hmm. But our pastor, he's probably not going to have strong opinions about political matters. It's just not his area of focus,
Okay.
right? He's studied deeply on the Bible. He wants to really connect with people and guide them in relationships and in how to be whole in their hearts. He's trying to do the same for himself. That's what, I think that's what pastors are supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
But I also want to be able to know that there's Christian men, and there are, and I have them in my life that I can go to and I can say, hey, Oregon's got these crazy laws about homelessness. What do we do? And
What
I'm
do
going
you
to
think
have,
we should do?
well, right. But I'm going to have those conversations with Christians. I'm going to listen to non-Christians, but fundamentally, I don't think they understand. They don't understand justice. They don't understand the need. And the farther left they are, the more I think they don't understand, because they've lost connection between, fundamentally, we talk about this, the father and the mother. So it's all mothering, it's all placating and comforting, and Oregon's
And I don't
falling
disagree
down.
with anything you've just said there. You said two realms that you're in.
Yeah,
Two
right.
roles you play.
And they're separate
When you're
roles.
in this one, they are separate. But when you're in this one and you're thinking about it, you're going to go to the other one. And what do you think? I completely agree with that. But see, I see you doing that as an individual. And you feel called to that. And I don't disagree with that. But I'm not hearing that as Christian nationalism.
So the way it becomes Christian nationalism, right, is if a law came down that was distinctly unbiblical. So the big ones are abortion, transgender rights,
Okay.
right, especially around kids.
There's tons of them happening.
I'm not only going to say no to those laws, but I'm going to say no because of God in heaven, because Jesus teaches us.
I don't disagree with this.
And so I'm going to declare it and say, I think our country should be Christian. And
Okay,
as a
so I don't
Christian, I
agree
won't
with
vote
that.
for that.
I didn't agree with that statement, but I agreed with your saying I won't support it because I think these things are wrong. I thought you were going to say because I'm a Christian.
Yeah, because as a Christian, I want our nation to be Christian.
Okay, so that's where I don't. I don't.
But you
want
don't think
our
nations
nation-
can be Christian.
No, that's correct.
So it's not that you don't want Christian
I want
nationalism.
all the people
you don't
in
think
the
it's
possible
possible
that can be, but there is no nation who's supposed to sign off and say we're Christian.
Well, let me ask you this.
Is there an individual?
Are there Christian families?
Yes.
How did that happen?
No. Okay. Trick
Right,
question.
right?
Wait, I'm going to back up and say no then. If this is where you're going to go.
Yeah.
No, there are no Christian families. There could become Christian families if each of them become converted, each of their children, but it's not by virtue of the mom and dad set the tone and say, I know I've heard you say this, and I didn't agree with it, but I don't think because mom and dad are Christians, it means we're a Christian family other than adjectively as a descriptor. These are the values we walk in.
Well, and this is where we're getting into level 2, right? So level 1 is persuasion.
Yes,
level 2 is
that's right,
law.
Exactly right.
And so as a father, in my household, the Bible creates the law in the sense that children obey their parents.
But
right?
that's not really what Christian is, though. Christian is not keeping the law. Christian is a changed heart that follows Jesus. And you can't do...
You don't become a Christian by obeying the law, but as a Christian, you do obey the law.
I agree with that, but what that means is obeying the law is not of the essence of Christianity.
No, it's the byproduct.
There is no Christianity without it. Yeah, it's the byproduct.
Well, but it's like saying that apples aren't the essence of the apple tree. Like, yeah, okay, they're not. It's a tree. No. It's got roots and things.
Okay, I don't know about that.
But analogy, you know a tree by its fruit, right?
But wait, let's go back to the parent one because I sense an advantage here.
Okay, take it.
Because, I mean, we'll use your 3 kids because there's nothing bad going on with your 3 kids right now.
That we know of.
If there was, I wouldn't use it as an example because it could be painful. But you actually, as a dad, you can say our home is Christian home, but the most you can actually get is their external submission and obedience to that and respect towards
exactly
that.
That's right.
And I think that's legitimate, but that's, in a sense, you could say if that's what you mean by a Christian home, okay, I agree with that. But if you meant by a Christian home that they really are followers of Jesus, it's out of your control.
That's right.
It's a realm you can't deal with.
And the exact same things could be said about government. The government can't make people Christian, but it can set up laws and rules.
Well, I'm saying we can't make the government Christian.
I
make
think
our nation Christian.
To the degree you can make your family Christian, you can make the nation Christian. So if that degree is 0, then we're agreed.
Okay.
But the way you just described the role of law in a home, it sounds exactly how I want the role of law in a nation.
Okay.
That laws should be written to honor God.
Okay.
Just like our customs and rituals around our home.
Well, I don't disagree
how we celebrate,
that laws should be written to honor God, but wait a minute. The problem...
Jesus as king, should I say it that way?
No. Okay, so...
Versus deism.
We're getting to force again. You say, I want my home to be a Christian home. And your wife...
But I'm not talking about level 3. I'm not talking about like militant force. I'm talking about authority.
I know.
Okay.
We're just comparing 1 and 2.
Yeah.
What I heard you as saying 3 is, we'll cover it another time because you did have a caveat. If all the options run out, is what you said.
Yeah, but I think I hold that caveat exclusive of political values. I think that's true everywhere.
Okay, so we'll talk about it another time.
Yeah.
So our conversation can focus on the difference between level 1 and level 2.
Right.
I don't think we need to have the other one at this point. There's a difference when you try to analogize up from family to government.
Yeah.
Because if you and your wife get married and you share the same value, you have a right to do that. There's no other sources to interact with.
Yeah.
In a government, there are people that are not Christians.
Yeah.
Would you say, I know you don't mean this, but what I feel like you would say, but it's only me forcing you to my consistency, is that they're not really citizens because they're not Christians.
Well, I don't know that I would exclude citizenship from people that aren't Christians. But my goal would be, of course, that every person become Christian. Realistically, that's not going to happen. But in the sense to say that everybody would see the Christian nature of our government and look on it and with favor. I think that is a possibility.
Say that last part again. I zoned out.
Okay,
somewhere
so
else.
the New Testament describes at times, not exclusively, but there were times where Christians were favored by all the people, even though those people weren't Christian. And so that's the sort of ideal that I see reaching for, is to say, okay, in a country that's Christian, where Christianity has primary influence, sets the laws,
Wait, though.
that the people who are non-Christian would look with favor on that and say, even though that's not my religion, this is the country I want to live in because it creates the byproducts.
And that's the ideal. But that you are describing Rome, that was not Christian, it was pagan, multiple gods.
Yeah.
And you're talking about the church's activity in a pagan culture, not trying to change the pagan culture, not trying to change the pagan or Roman governments.
Only the culture at that time, right?
The culture in the sense that when I live, I interact with people and you create a culture.
Yeah.
And when two of us do it, we create a little symbiotic culture that's a little bigger. And
Sure.
And when people band together, they
And it
create
grows
this
and it
sphere.
grows, yeah.
And in that sphere of the early church, the non-Christian Roman citizens of a pagan culture noticed it and said, something's good here.
Some of them did, right?
Yeah,
and then
some
the
of them.
rulers turned on them usually.
Yeah.
Right?
But the point is, that was all, my point would be, that sounds like it's all influence, no law. Because the Roman law still was not telling to those people, be good.
It's influence until you win. And here's what I mean. That influence grows and grows and grows until somebody says, you know what, this Christian guy, we should make him the governor. Well, now the governor's got to make the laws. And so now it becomes level 2.
Yeah, this won't solve anything between us, but this is where we probably differ on Constantine. You say Constantine is a victory, and I think it's a defeat.
I don't know that I can know enough about Constantine, to be honest. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I do doubt the assumption that I grew up hearing, which was that once Christianity became favored in Rome, that it just created all these corruption. But I wouldn't throw it away either, because I've seen it. What I see, and this is how I think about politics, right, is that in any area of politics, in any like state, so Oregon, the Democrats statewide dominate and have for ever since mail-in balloting, actually.
Yes, that's right.
Kind of interesting. Okay. But you can go to areas of the South where the
There's been
Republicans
no
have dominated.
Republican government, I'll say it on air. Since mailing ballots large, it's the longest stretch in Oregon's history of not going back and forth.
In the governorship.
In the governorship.
Well, and we couldn't even get one
I
statewide
wonder
elected.
why.
We got one guy and then he died like pretty quickly. But so you can also go, when you have one party rule, you invite corruption, whether that's Republican or Democrat.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And I think the same is true when you think about religious influence. Right? So if you go to countries that like Eastern European countries, like we were talking about earlier, are you going to find some idyllic Christianity there? Right? I don't think so. But you might find, like Jesus talked about, hearts that are the condition of different soil, that's either ready to receive seeds or not. And what I see is a hardening happening because of not just laws, but culture. I think culture is the right. Laws happen because of culture and not in reverse, right? Although the Supreme Court has definitely influenced how people think of right and wrong. So it goes back and forth. Yeah. There are eddies in the stream, maybe you could say. But if you go to Eastern Europe, you're not going to find some idyllic Christian culture. In fact, church attendance is a lot lower there than it is here.
I'm not holding you to that. I'm not hearing you say that. I'm not trying to hold you to it in some consistency that.
But what I do want, I want to mingle together, and this is where we probably disagree. I want to mingle together patriotism with Christianity. I'm okay with that.
See, I think,
in the sense that I want, the way that I want people to have nostalgia, for example, about their town. Everybody loves this. You know, if you grew up in a small town, you stay here. You grow up and you think, I like this place. It's better than the other towns, even though an outsider might think they're both the same. There's something about my hometown that makes it better. And so
I agree with the form of allegiance.
And so take that and say, and I want our town. I mean, this is true of our town. I pray for it often, that Christianity would have more influence.
Yeah. I agree with that. Where I make a distinction is, I call it allegiance. You call it, what do you call it?
Patriotism, yeah.
Which is fine. I'm fine with that. But the reason I like allegiance is it helps me to distinguish. I view myself as having two citizenship, and I owe something to both.
Yeah.
But the one I owe to my government is way less. The one I owe to the kingdom of heaven, it actually trumps all the time. I would like it to trump less. I would like my state citizenship, whether it's Oregon or the United States or whatever, or SIO. I would like that to be more in line with what my Christian one is, my heritage in heaven. But the reality is it's a sin-broken world, and so it's always going to be distorted and off.
And to where, when our allegiance to Oregon goes in conflict with our allegiance to heaven, Oregon loses.
Yes,
without a
and
doubt.
I don't say you're thinking differently.
Yeah.
But what that does for me is says that keeps them from, you want a merging taking place, is what I hear.
I want change at the state level to be inspired by my Christian faith.
Okay, wait.
I want it to drive it.
Okay.
To say,
Let
because I'm a
restate
Christian,
your position then on
I'm going to seek positions of power, and when I get them, I'm going to use those positions of power to promote Christian values.
Not with you as an individual, but that's the mission of the church.
I'm not talking about the church. I'm talking about Christians.
Well, the church meaning all Christians. The Christians, when they are looked at as their community.
Okay.
Every individual has to face the calling, in my perspective, of to what degree do I get involved with local government, let's say, or the calling of my work. How do I make money?
Could you say it this way? Could you say, to what degree will God judge me for my involvement or lack thereof in local
Yes, only
community
in terms
endeavors
of the callings that you're given by God.
Of course. I mean, he judges you, each person in his own.
And that calling does include the decision of local government, and each person has to answer it. I don't have any problem with that. I don't understand that as being Christian nationalism. What I hear in Christian nationalism is that the churches are supposed to be teaching their Christian congregations, adherents, that you all are supposed to be involved in government in some form. Maybe it's an 80-20. There might be a few people who say, don't run, you'll never get elected, so don't even try. But by and large, you're all supposed to go and try to be in positions of power in order to affect change. And
I don't hear that message coming out of Christian nationalism.
Okay.
As far as everyone.
I
think you could say everybody ought to vote. So to that degree, that's a beginning. If every Christian voted by a conscience that was guided by a biblical message.
Just out of curiosity, voting out of which citizenship? Or do you think both?
Voting in the ballots that get mailed to your house.
I know that. But out of what realm am I to feel this obligation? My realm as a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, or my realm as a citizen of Oregon? So
is it in Daniel where the king Belteshazzar gets judged to be found wanting? The hand that comes and writes on the wall. He wasn't Jewish, right? And yet God was judging him and condemning him for his failure to judge rightly, to rule righteously as a king. So I think God looks upon the American people in the same way. So to the degree that we carry responsibility as citizens in America, it's the same, it's some small degree the same as if you were born in Babylon and all those centuries ago and just so happened to be the one who would become king. You can't escape it. It was your birthright.
So I agree.
And the judgment of God will be upon us.
Out of my citizenship, I think since I'm a part of a democracy, I have a responsibility to vote.
Right.
But I don't think it comes out of my Christianity, other than my Christianity says, do the responsibilities that are before you. But it's not my Christianity that says vote. So maybe we can transition.
But it's Christianity that tells us God will judge us for not engaging in the political sphere.
I know. There is a connection. But it's not out of the source. Can we shift gears, not in terms of wanting to abandon that, but in terms of saying, let's contest in this arena, then contest in this one and that one, because eventually they start to connect.
Okay, but we're at an hour and 15.
Oh my goodness!
So we are going to need
to do my word therefore.
Part 5, or we're only at part 2 of this debate.
Let's just say we're going to do this a bunch of times.
Yeah, we'll make it a part for a while.
We're not going to do the Beatitudes, but I have a Beatitude question because I've been thinking about it, and I think it'll be the 6th time we've talked about the Beatitudes. Well, but we'll
kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Okay. The word therefore. And this is the Matthew 28.
Therefore, go and make disciples of every nation.
Or disciple every nation.
Yeah.
Disciple the nations.
Yeah. So people add the word "go." I was looking at that this week. Is that correct?
No.
Therefore,
it is go. It's a participle. So having gone. It's
having gone. That's
having gone. Therefore, disciple all the nations.
Yeah.
And it's actually not make disciples, even though it's not necessarily wrong, but it's the emphasis is on the verb of action.
Because we tend to think of the word disciple like student. It's a noun. versus teacher.
Yes,
or
that's
teaching
right. We're
the
gonna
action.
if I'm going to make a disciple, you were in this category, now I'm going to put you in this category. And it's a black and white. And the idea here is no, when I interact with you, if you're the one I'm supposed to be working with, then there's this long process, and I'm
You're teaching them all
the whole process of you.
Yeah.
From wherever you start to my last contact with you,
Right,
so to
right.
speak.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the next part of the phrasing is not additional, but it's duplicative. Making disciples means these two things: baptizing in this character of this being, and teaching to obey all things that I've been given to you.
Yeah.
And so I don't think there's three different things. I think there's two things. There's one thing, discipling, and then baptizing them in that. But the point I get to is this. When you talked about, I've not heard anybody say it the way you said it. The Old Testament is that where God illustrated how nations are to run, and the New Testament how individuals. I don't actually agree with that off my reflexive action, but
I'm not 100% on it. It's just how I heard described how the Pilgrims thought about governments as they were trying to establish their
well,
colony.
I wouldn't disagree with that, because remember, they came from where church and state are overlapped, and that is they called themselves.
And the big question
Israel.
of the Pilgrims was how far, because it's like, oh, you're a Baptist, I'm a Presbyterian, now we got to kill each other, right? I mean, Europe was at that level as far as their religious wars.
That's correct.
And so part of the American experiment was to say, you know what, every creed is welcome here. That was where it landed by the Constitution, right? It didn't start that way, but in the beginning it was, if you're not in our, if you're in Massachusetts, go to Rhode Island.
Yes,
right.
That's exactly.
They'll take your kind over there.
But start it there.
And that's where the federalism came in, right? If we're going to all get together, we're going to have to open it up a little bit.
That's exactly right.
But what America has done, really, I think in the last 50, 60 years, since the 70s, 60s, 70s, is say, actually that basket includes every religion and the non-religion.
So I agree well.
So that's where I think
we
went
the
wrong.
basket. But I agree that there was a misstep of pluralism that cut out theism.
Right.
You can't pray because, look, there's a Muslim. He doesn't want to pray to your God, so you can't. We're not. And I disagree with that. That's why I think we were a theistic, grounded on, theism.
Yeah.
You can't. If you cut God out, we lose what American Democratic Republic that we had.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's the same as saying it's Christian. I think that's a lot of more steps down the road from theism.
So there was a recent Supreme Court ruling, and I haven't read it or looked closely at it, but there was a football coach in Washington State who got fired because he kept doing after the game's over, come to the 50-yard line, and we're going to pray
On school property.
on school property. Still,
But his coaching position,
coaching duties were over. He's still obviously the coach.
Yes.
And so the Supreme Court precedent before that case arrived was something where they interpret the establishment clause of the First Amendment.
That's right.
That the government shall not establish a religion or inhibit the free exercise thereof. Okay. So he won.
I know.
And it changed how the U.S. government now is going to interpret the establishment clause, saying that federal employees.
It had
I do
gotten
too.
out of whack.
But the understanding up until that point, and this is how I was trained, is that you can't have any religious expression as a public employee.
I know.
Because it'll establish religion.
That was too much. They tried to excise God from.
But that's far. To go to all the way to say a public person in their role can step, like the governor could say, okay,
let's pray.
We're going to pray to Jesus.
I know.
Right?
I know.
A very distinct, that's what I want.
I know.
And if people elect a Muslim and he does it, then the people get the Muslim they elect.
Yes, I was just going to say the exact same thing. What that precedent, my understanding is, it says you can pray out of the faith background. It's not establishing a state religion because the coach prays. It wouldn't be establishing state religion if the coach kneeled down to the east and said a prayer either.
Correct, because that would be fair.
He'd be acting. Now, if his job in some ways established and you need to come and corral and this is what you need to believe to be on the football team.
But part of that is the Establishment Clause only applies to the federal government anyway.
Yeah.
So when the Constitution was established, individual states had their own churches. And officially accepting this is the creed that we go by in Delaware or wherever, right?
Yeah, I'm not aware of that history as much. Where I agree with you, it started out the states. So Maryland was for Catholics.
But that was the federal aspect of it, was to say,
Yeah.
look, each state can have their own church, but if we're going to be a nation,
Well, I don't know that.
we got to say every church can be part of it. And that's why that we can't discriminate based on creed was so foundational. Creed being the different denominations, but all Christian.
Right. Well,
But even the
I don't
Supreme Court
necessarily
was designating
See,
America.
you keep thinking you use Christian as if it's the same as theistic, and I don't think it did. So,
I would say it this way. I think that the founders in some of their writings used inclusive language beyond Christianity to say natural law and nature's God. But as I read farther into what they were writing to each other, they would not have said that. They would have said, and I think it's something like when you listen now to evangelists or apologists for Christianity, they'll often use logic and science and other things to say, can you see how Christianity is actually really relatable? You know, there's all these reasons as an invitation, but at the core, they're still Christian and they're still saying Jesus is the way and the truth and the life, and no one goes to the Father. And and that's how I read the founders to have worked.
So if I were to try to say the elevator speech, right? 30-second view of why I don't agree, it's the word therefore. It's captured in that word.
Okay.
All authority has been given to me, every sphere.
Yeah.
I changed my mind. I think you're right on that.
All the kings.
All the kings, all the
schools,
governments.
all the governments.
The ones in rebellion,
Yeah.
all the principalities and powers that are leading the nations astray, all the dads and moms that have been given authority by God in their family, every level of authority, even autonomous authority to each individual.
That's right. He's king of
It's
all the kings.
mine.
Yep.
Of every form of king you want to invent.
And every nation.
Yes. Therefore, I don't see go and find the places to exercise power to have a good influence. Therefore go,
as you go.
as you're going, make
Right.
disciples and teach them what I'm saying.
Right.
I say, what I see is that the New Testament does not engage with governments. That's not the right way to say it. Does not try to propagate and proselytize governments. It tries to proselytize individuals.
Except for Sergius Paulus.
I don't know who that is.
So the magistrate who Paul stood before and tried to persuade to become a Christian.
Agrippa?
Was it Agrippa?
Yeah.
Well, who was Sergius Paulus? Was the one with the Bar Jesus, the Elymas, the sorcerer next to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that guy became a Christian that day
Yeah.
while Paul was on trial. But Paul said, I make it my ambition to stand before Caesar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
So here's how I would read
it's
that.
not that he didn't get brought before magistrates,
Yeah.
but he went to the populous places in order to evangelize the people, whoever would listen to him.
That's right.
And he went to city centers as cultural spheres of influence, but that's not the same as going to try to become involved with the government. And
So-
I think it's an issue of power.
I think it's and we'll have to do this next time because there are several words in the New Testament that I don't know if it's deliberate, but I see a theme of them being transliterated in ways that diminish the governmental descriptions of Jesus' kingdom, specifically church and apostle, but there are a couple others. And so what I read that to mean is Jesus says, okay, every king